Night often arrives more quietly than expected. The house settles, lights dim, and the pace of the day finally loosens its hold. Even with that change, the inner world does not always follow along. Lying still can make awareness sharper. Without movement to absorb attention, thoughts feel closer, as if they have stepped forward. What stayed in the background earlier now becomes easier to notice. This is not always about worry. Sometimes it is memory drifting back without a clear reason. At other times, it is a loose sense of anticipation with nothing specific attached. The mind remains active, responding to the openness of the moment. During the day, structure gives thinking a direction. Tasks arrive one after another, and attention moves with them. Night removes that structure, leaving awareness without a clear path to follow. In that space, the mind begins to wander, not urgently, not forcefully, but steadily. Ideas appear, linger briefly, then give way to others. Sleep does not arrive on command in these moments. The body may be ready while attention continues to move. This mismatch can feel confusing, especially when rest is expected to be simple. Many restless nights begin this way. Nothing dramatic has happened. There is no clear problem to solve. Awareness simply remains awake, responding to quiet rather than noise. Thoughts continue, shaped by the absence of interruption. The night holds them gently, without asking where they should go next. As the night deepens, time begins to feel less structured. Minutes stretch without markers, and attention no longer tracks progress. Awareness drifts, no longer guided by clocks or conversations. The mind notices this openness quickly. Without direction from the outside, it turns inward with ease. Inner movement becomes more visible, not louder, just closer. Thoughts at night rarely arrive with urgency. They come softly, almost politely, asking to be noticed rather than solved. A feeling might surface without context, carrying weight without a clear story. Stillness gives these impressions room. What passed through earlier now lingers longer than expected. Attention stays nearby, sensing that something remains unfinished. This does not mean the mind is doing something wrong. Night removes distraction, and awareness responds to what remains. The quiet itself invites inner activity. Lying awake can feel like waiting without knowing for what. The body rests, while attention continues to move gently. There is no clear signal telling the mind that the day has ended. Some nights feel fuller than others, not with thoughts that demand action, but with subtle impressions that refuse to fade. The mind follows these traces simply because there is space to do so. In this space, thinking does not rush. It moves slowly, guided by familiarity rather than intention. The night holds this motion without interruption, allowing awareness to remain awake a little longer. In the quiet of night, attention often shifts toward what was barely noticed before. Small details from the day can return without forming a clear sequence. A tone from a conversation, a moment that passed quickly, or a feeling that never settled can move closer. These impressions do not arrive as problems. They exist more like signals, carrying a sense of presence rather than urgency. Awareness stays near them, sensing that something is still active beneath the surface. During daylight hours, movement keeps these signals from lingering. Tasks and interactions pull attention outward, giving thinking a direction. Night removes that pull, leaving awareness free to wander inward. This wandering does not follow a straight path. Thoughts connect loosely, guided by association instead of intention. Time feels different here, less measured, more fluid. Lying awake can feel like being suspended between moments. The day has ended, yet the next one has not begun. Attention stays in that space, moving gently without knowing where to rest. The mind does not separate memory from anticipation very clearly at night. Past impressions and imagined possibilities can sit side by side. Awareness moves between them without noticing the shift. This movement is not loud or dramatic. It continues quietly, shaped by openness rather than demand. Thinking stays present simply because there is room for it to be there. In these moments, rest feels close but undefined. The body settles, while attention remains alert. The night holds this state without interruption, allowing inner motion to continue, unhurried and unresolved. As the night stretches on, attention often settles into a slower rhythm. There is less pressure to move, yet awareness does not fully relax. Instead, it drifts, following subtle currents that were unnoticed earlier. The mind at night responds differently to quiet. Without sound or activity to anchor focus, inner sensations become clearer. A faint unease, a lingering curiosity, or a soft emotional trace can draw attention without explanation. These sensations rarely form complete thoughts. They remain partial, more like impressions than ideas. Awareness stays with them, sensing meaning without needing words. Nighttime thinking often feels circular because nothing interrupts it. There is no signal telling attention to shift or stop. Movement continues gently, guided by openness rather than intention. Lying awake can feel like waiting without anticipation. The body rests against stillness, while the mind remains lightly active. This contrast makes inner motion feel more noticeable than it did during the day. The mind does not always recognize that rest is allowed here. Quiet removes urgency, but it also removes distraction. Attention fills the space left behind, moving simply because it can. Thoughts drift closer together in this environment. Memory and imagination overlap without clear boundaries. Awareness moves between them, responding to texture rather than timeline. Nothing in this movement demands resolution. It continues softly, held by the night itself. Inner activity remains present, unhurried, lingering in the open space between rest and wakefulness. Night creates a different kind of awareness. Without the steady noise of the day, attention becomes more sensitive to small internal shifts. What felt distant earlier now feels closer, not because it grew stronger, but because there is space to notice it. Thoughts at this hour often lack clear shape. They arrive without a beginning and fade without an ending. Awareness follows their movement, not searching for meaning, simply staying present with what appears. This is why nighttime thinking can feel continuous. Nothing interrupts the flow. There are no signals to redirect attention or to move on to something else. The mind stays engaged because it has learned to respond to openness. When there is room, awareness fills it naturally. That response does not come from urgency, but from familiarity. Certain impressions may hover longer than expected, a feeling that never found language earlier, a subtle tension that was set aside during the day. Attention lingers nearby, sensing activity without knowing what to do with it. Lying still can make this movement feel more noticeable. The body rests into the surface beneath it, while the mind continues to drift. This difference can create the sense that sleep is close, yet not arriving. Night does not ask the mind to resolve anything. It simply offers silence. Within that silence, awareness keeps moving, guided by habit rather than need. Thoughts continue to pass through this open space. Some leave faint traces, others dissolve quickly. Attention remains lightly involved, held by the quiet, lingering between rest and motion. As the night continues, attention often settles into a steady, unforced rhythm. There is no rush to arrive anywhere, yet awareness does not fully withdraw. It stays present, lightly engaged, following the quiet movement inside. The mind responds to darkness differently than it does to daylight. Without visual cues or activity, inner sensations become more pronounced. A subtle emotional tone, barely noticed earlier, can drift into focus without explanation. These sensations rarely demand action. They exist more as atmosphere than as clear thoughts. Awareness remains nearby, sensing something without needing to define it. Nighttime thinking often moves without direction. Ideas connect loosely, guided by association rather than purpose. Time feels less structured, allowing attention to wander without resistance. The body rests more deeply in this environment. Muscles soften, breathing slows, and movement becomes minimal. Attention, however, may continue to drift, exploring the quiet space left behind. This contrast can make inner activity feel stronger than it actually is. With fewer distractions, even gentle motion becomes noticeable. The mind appears active simply because everything else has become still. There is no signal telling awareness that it must stop. Night does not demand conclusions or resolutions. Thoughts are free to pass through, shaped by habit rather than necessity. In this open space, thinking continues softly. Some impressions remain for a moment. Others fade quickly. Attention stays lightly involved, held by the quiet, moving slowly between wakefulness and rest. At this hour, the mind often moves without a clear subject. Attention drifts through sensations rather than ideas, responding to subtle shifts that are hard to name. Nothing calls for focus, yet awareness stays gently active. The quiet allows small internal movements to feel larger. A faint emotional tone can rise without attaching itself to a memory. A sense of something unfinished may hover even when no event comes to mind. Night removes the usual reference points. Without conversation, light, or motion, attention turns inward by default. The mind explores what is nearby simply because it is available. This exploration doesn't follow logic. Thoughts blend into feelings, and feelings dissolve into impressions. Awareness moves through these layers without choosing a direction. Lying awake can feel like floating between states. The body is heavy and still, while attention remains light and mobile. This contrast makes inner motion easier to notice than during the day. The mind does not label this movement as effort. It continues quietly, shaped by habit rather than intention. Thinking stays present because nothing interrupts it. Trying to identify a cause can sharpen attention. Searching for a reason adds structure where none existed. The movement continues, now accompanied by effort. When attention remains with sensation rather than explanation, the texture softens. Thoughts still appear, but they do not gather weight. Awareness stays open, drifting with the night, neither settling nor pushing forward. As the night holds steady, attention often becomes attuned to the smallest changes. A shift in breathing, a change in pressure, or a subtle emotional tone can draw awareness without effort. Nothing announces itself clearly, yet the mind notices anyway. In this environment, thinking rarely feels sharp. Ideas arrive softly, without edges, and remain loosely formed. Awareness stays with their presence rather than their meaning. The absence of stimulation changes how attention behaves. Without sound or movement to guide it, awareness drifts inward. The mind explores what feels active, even when activity is barely there. This exploration does not seek resolution. It moves through impressions, textures, and quiet sensations. Time feels less defined, allowing motion to continue without direction. Night often blurs the boundary between thought and feeling. A memory may appear only as mood. Anticipation may exist without a clear image attached to it. Lying still allows these experiences to come closer. The body rests, while awareness remains slightly alert. This contrast can make inner movement feel more noticeable than it truly is. The mind does not interpret this as a problem. It continues because the space allows it to. Attention stays engaged, responding to openness rather than demand. Thoughts pass through this open field gently. Some leave faint impressions. Others dissolve quickly. Awareness remains present, drifting alongside the night, lingering between motion and rest. As the night goes on, attention can begin to move in softer patterns. There is less structure holding it in place, and awareness responds by wandering gently. Nothing pulls strongly, yet movement continues without resistance. Thoughts during these hours often arrive without urgency. They don't ask to be solved or organized. They simply appear, carrying a quiet sense of presence. Some impressions feel closer than others. A faint emotional tone may linger without attaching itself to a memory. Attention stays near it, sensing activity without knowing what it represents. The mind does not separate clearly between what matters and what does not at night. Anything that carries even slight energy can draw awareness. That openness allows many small signals to pass through. Lying awake can make this feel continuous. Without interruption, attention follows one subtle shift into the next. Time loses its shape, and thinking blends into observation. The body remains still through all of this. Breathing slows, muscles soften, and movement fades. Awareness, however, stays lightly engaged, responding to the quiet. Nothing here asks for direction. The mind moves because space is available. Attention remains present, guided by habit rather than intention. Thoughts continue to drift through this open field. Some pass without leaving a trace. Others linger briefly. Awareness stays alongside the motion, unhurried, suspended within the night. As the night moves deeper, awareness often becomes less anchored to any single point. Attention floats between sensations, impressions, and faint inner signals. Nothing stands out sharply, yet the mind remains gently active. In this state, thinking does not follow clear questions. It moves through fragments that never form into full thoughts. Awareness notices their presence without asking where they came from. The absence of daytime structure changes how the mind behaves. Without schedules or conversations to shape focus, attention turns inward by default. The inner world becomes the primary landscape simply because nothing else is competing for notice. This can make the night feel long, not because time is heavy, but because it is undefined. Moments blend together, and thinking continues without markers. Some inner signals repeat quietly. A sensation returns without explanation. Attention stays near it, sensing activity without urgency. The mind does not rush to interpret these signals. It remains present, allowing them to exist without resolution. That presence can continue longer than expected. Lying still amplifies this experience. The body settles more deeply, while awareness remains alert. This difference can make inner motion feel stronger than it truly is. Nothing here demands action or decision. Thoughts drift through the quiet space of the night. Attention stays lightly involved, moving slowly, without settling into sleep or fully waking. As the night continues, attention often becomes more diffuse. Rather than focusing on one place, awareness spreads gently across the inner space. Nothing demands clarity, yet movement does not fully settle. Thoughts at this point feel less like sentences and more like fragments. An image may surface without context. A feeling may pass through without a name. Attention follows these shifts without trying to hold them. The mind responds to quiet by staying available. Without cues telling it where to rest, awareness remains lightly engaged. This engagement does not feel intentional. It simply continues. Time loses its usual boundaries here. Minutes stretch without direction, and moments blend into one another. Thinking continues without a sense of progress or conclusion. Lying awake can feel like existing between layers of experience. The body is heavy and still, grounded in the bed. Attention feels lighter, moving freely without attachment. The mind does not judge this movement as effort. It remains present because the environment allows it. Stillness outside gives space for motion inside. Nothing in this state asks to be resolved. Inner activity unfolds without urgency. Awareness stays near what appears without shaping it into meaning. Thoughts drift across this open field quietly. Some dissolve almost immediately, others linger briefly. Attention remains with the motion itself, suspended within the calm of the night. At this point in the night, awareness often feels suspended rather than active. The mind is no longer chasing anything, yet it has not fully withdrawn. Attention stays lightly present, as if listening without expecting a response. Thoughts lose their sharpness here. They no longer arrive as ideas that need attention. Instead, they pass as soft impressions, barely forming before they fade. Quiet allows these impressions to move freely. Without interruption, awareness drifts through them without resistance. Nothing pulls strongly, yet nothing signals an end to movement. The mind often treats this openness as a cue to remain available. Staying alert once meant being prepared. That readiness can linger even when the body has slowed. In this space, thinking blends into sensing. A shift in breathing, a change in warmth, or a subtle emotional tone can draw awareness. Attention notices without needing to interpret. Time continues to stretch. Moments pass without clear markers. The night feels wide, holding awareness without direction. The body rests deeply through all of this. Muscles soften further, and movement becomes minimal. Attention, however, stays gently engaged, responding to the quiet. Nothing here requires understanding. Inner motion continues softly, shaped by habit rather than need. Awareness remains present, hovering in the space where sleep has not yet arrived. As the night stretches on, awareness often feels less defined. Attention does not settle into one place, nor does it move with purpose. It remains present, loosely connected to whatever passes through. The mind at this hour responds more to atmosphere than to thought. A sense of heaviness, a shift in temperature, or a faint emotional tone can draw focus. Awareness notices without needing to decide what it means. Thinking becomes less structured here. Ideas do not unfold in sequences. They appear briefly, dissolve, and leave behind impressions rather than conclusions. Quiet allows this movement to continue without resistance. There is no interruption to redirect attention. The inner world expands simply because nothing narrows it. Lying awake can feel like drifting rather than waiting. The body remains grounded, supported by stillness. Attention moves more freely, unanchored by urgency or demand. The mind does not interpret this motion as effort. It continues because openness has become familiar. Awareness stays near whatever carries a trace of energy. Time becomes less noticeable. Minutes pass without distinction, blending into one another. Thinking merges with sensing, creating a steady inner flow. Nothing here asks to be finished. The movement remains gentle and unresolved. Attention stays present within the quiet, continuing softly, without choosing where to land. As the night continues, awareness often rests in a quiet, in-between state. It is no longer actively searching, yet it has not faded into sleep. Attention stays present, lightly connected to whatever stirs inside. The mind responds more slowly here. Thoughts do not rush forward or stack upon one another. They drift, appearing briefly before softening into the background. In this space, sensation carries more weight than meaning. A shift in position, a change in breathing, or a faint emotional echo can draw notice. Awareness stays with these signals without trying to name them. Stillness outside allows movement inside to feel more noticeable. With no sound or activity to compete, even gentle inner motion stands out. The mind appears active simply because everything else has gone quiet. Time feels suspended rather than measured. Minutes pass without distinction, and attention no longer tracks progress. Thinking blends into sensing, creating a continuous inner presence. The body settles further into rest, muscles release, and breathing deepens on its own. Attention, however, remains lightly alert, moving alongside the calm. Nothing here asks to be resolved or completed. Inner activity continues without urgency. Awareness stays near what arises, held by the night, lingering between wakefulness and sleep. As the night grows quieter, attention often becomes less attached to any single experience. It no longer follows thoughts closely, yet it has not let go of them either. Awareness stays nearby, open and receptive, without choosing what deserves focus. The mind at this hour does not rush. Thinking slows into something more diffuse, spread gently across sensation and impression. Ideas pass through without forming edges or demanding clarity. A faint sense of presence can remain, not tied to memory or anticipation, but simply to being awake. Attention rests within that presence, moving lightly without direction. The absence of stimulation changes how awareness behaves. Without cues to react, the mind does not know where to land. It continues to hover, guided by habit rather than by need. Body and mind move at different speeds here. The body settles deeper, heavy, and still. Attention remains mobile, responding to subtle inner shifts. This difference can make wakefulness feel prolonged, not because something is wrong, but because nothing interrupts the process. The night allows awareness to stay open longer than usual. Inner movement becomes quieter, though it does not disappear. Thoughts pass more slowly, with less insistence. Awareness remains present, not attached to outcome or resolution. The night holds this state gently. Attention lingers in the space between rest and sleep, continuing without urgency, without conclusion, simply remaining. At this point in the night, awareness often feels unanchored. Attention no longer searches for anything specific, yet it hasn't settled into rest. It remains present, lightly responsive to whatever stirs beneath the surface. Thoughts appear less defined now. They do not arrive as ideas that need attention. Instead, they move through as fragments, impressions, or quiet shifts in feeling. The mind seems to listen more than it thinks. Awareness stays open, not waiting for answers, simply noticing movement as it passes. Nothing asks to be followed all the way through. Without external cues, attention drifts on its own. The night provides no instructions, no markers of progress. Time stretches quietly, allowing inner motion to continue without interruption. The body rests deeper in this environment. Stillness becomes heavier, more complete. Attention, however, remains light, moving independently of the body's calm. This separation can make wakefulness feel prolonged. Not tense, not urgent, just extended. The mind stays nearby because nothing signals that it should withdraw. Inner activity continues in small ways. A sensation changes. A feeling shifts slightly. Awareness notices, then moves on without holding on. The night contains this movement without pushing it anywhere. Attention lingers in the open space between states, remaining present, responsive, and unfinished, without needing to arrive at sleep just yet. Near the edge of sleep, awareness often feels suspended rather than settled. The mind is no longer actively engaging, yet it has not fully let go. Attention stays present, responding quietly to whatever remains in motion. Thoughts at this point do not arrive as complete ideas. They appear as brief impressions, faint images, or shifts in sensation. Awareness notices them without following their direction. The night offers no instructions here. There is no signal to continue, and no signal to stop. Inner movement carries on simply because the space allows it. Time becomes less noticeable. Moments pass without distinction, and awareness does not track them. Thinking blends further into sensing, creating a steady, open field. The body rests deeply now. Weight settles, breathing slows, and stillness feels heavier. Attention remains lighter, drifting independently of physical calm. This separation can feel unfamiliar. The body moves towards sleep, while awareness stays loosely awake. Nothing feels urgent, yet nothing fully fades. Inner activity continues in small, quiet ways. A sensation shifts. A feeling changes tone. Awareness responds, then releases, without holding on. The night holds this state without direction. Attention remains open, unfinished, and present, hovering gently where rest has not yet fully arrived.